6:01. Molly, would you like to do a roll call?
Yes. Chair Chastain. Vice Chair Steeman.
Here.
Commissioner Donnan. Commissioner Montfort. Commissioner Nelson.
Here.
And Commissioner Casey.
Here.
Great.
Excellent. Breezing right along. We'll move into next item, which is the consent agenda. Do I have any motions there?
Move approval.
I'll second.
Mark, thank you. Second by Mike, thank you. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor of approving the consent agenda, which includes approval of the minutes from our last meeting, say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstain? Motion passes 4-0-0. Flipping along at a good pace. This is great. Okay, so moving on to item number 3, which is the bulk of our meeting today, and this is our electrification workshop. So I see we have 4 people in attendance, and so I'm going to go ahead and say this now, and if we have more people that join as attendees, I will repeat this for those joining us. This meeting we're going to run a little bit different than our traditional commission meetings. We're going to have a bit more dialogue and interaction with our attendees as we get our presentations from our 3 guest panelists that we have with us today. Actually, I'm not seeing the PG&E rep yet, but maybe they'll join us. So what we're going to do with this, we're going to move into some presentations here. For those of you attending, please type your questions into the chat function or in the bottom hand corner of your participants window. If you're able to get the participants window open, in the very bottom right hand corner is a very tiny little icon with a miniature little hand. That will allow you to raise your hand. Go ahead and throw up a hand as you have questions or type your question into the chat feature, and our panelists will respond to those questions as they come in. I see we've got a few more attendees joining us, so welcome. Thank you for being here. A reminder that as we get into our presentations, please put your questions in the chat feature or in the participants window. If you're able to get the participants window open, there's a tiny little hand in the bottom right-hand corner. You can raise your hand. Molly will go ahead and unmute you as we come to your turn, and you will be able to directly speak and ask your question. Or again, you can type your question into the chat feature. We're going to ask that our panelists respond to questions within the chat feature. Commissioners, as you have questions, feel free to ask them or provide comments or commentary as we move through our presentation. But we're going to ask that our panelists respond to those questions that come in through the chat function. Any other logistics I need to hit, Molly, before we get into the presentations? Welcome, Kirk.
I've been trying to download this thing for like 15 minutes. And my computer is so screwed up now. It's got so many downloads of WebEx extensions and whatever. I have no idea why the hell this finally worked.
Well, I am not sure how to help you with that, Kirk, but I'm glad you're here.
Yeah, well, thank you.
Glad you made it. Maybe after the meeting we can help you maybe troubleshoot, figure out what's going on over there.
I don't know. It's crazy.
But glad you made it. Molly, were there any other logistics we needed to cover before we jump into presentations?
No, I don't believe so.
Okay, great. Again, put your questions in the chat or raise your miniature little hand icon to be recognized for speaking. We are not going to hold to the 3-minute comment. This is intended to be more of a conversation and a dialogue as we go along. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Ryan, who's going to run the presentations for us. Ryan, floor is yours.
Well, I think, Brendan, are you going to give us a little setup first before I hop into my presentation?
Yeah, I'll do a very, very quick intro. Again, I'm Brendan B., Community Development Director for the City of Chico. Welcome, everybody. Thank you, Commission, for hosting this workshop tonight. Just kind of a little bit of background. The Climate Action Plan update to date has been going on for a little over a year. It's been a crazy year, as we all know. I was going to just highlight that it's been what I believe a very good process with public engagement, lots of discussion at the commission level, albeit with the challenges of COVID-19. So I want to say thanks to everybody, including the consultant and the commission, for being available and doing things virtually. So thank you. One of the key measures that has come out of this process is this notion of building electrification. And it's been an issue that's kind of a hot topic because there are ramifications associated with such a concept. So what I thought would be a good idea, or we did as staff, is that it would be, and the consultant Rincon, would be good to hold an electrification workshop, present information, let people have a better understanding of what electrification means in building. And so that's what we're going to try to put together for everyone tonight. We've got, I think, some excellent speakers. We're starting off with, everyone's familiar with Ryan. He's going to kind of give an overview, a little bit of the process, how we got here, how the measure was identified, and some of the quantification aspects of that, and where we are in building or Title 24 and how that's moving forward. So he's going to kind of give an overview. And then fortunately, we have a local developer, Chuck Tatro, who's also joined us tonight and is going to share his experience doing an all-electric project here in Chico. So very excited about that. Point is, even before it's being required, here's an individual that's going to share his experience of doing it ahead of the curve. And then Hannah Kay is also joining us from PG&E to provide yet another perspective from a utility provider. So again, as Cherie had mentioned, after the presentations, we want this to be kind of informal, an opportunity for people to discuss, if they desire, ask questions. And so the goal would be for staff and the consultant to facilitate that conversation. So with that, I'd like to kind of kick it off with Ryan to provide a bit of an overview and some context.
Thanks, Brendan. Share my screen here. Everybody see that okay?
Yes.
Oh, let me all right. So I'm going to try to keep it brief. I think some of you may have seen a lot of this already, but I'm going to try to give you an overview of what building electrification is, why it's a proposed strategy, why we're thinking through the impacts of electrification, specifically on new construction. And then I'm going to hand it over to Chuck to talk a little bit more about, take a really local perspective and see how the numbers play out actually in Chico. And then, as Brendan said, hand it over to Hannah from PG&E to talk a little bit about how they view all of this and their capacity and how it's changing the way they're thinking about energy and providing that service. And then we'll break it up for conversation. Excited to hear what folks have to say and have a little bit of a Q&A. So the reason all of this is going on, like Brendan mentioned, is we are working on the City of Chico Climate Action Plan. And a big driver of that is trying to align with the state targets for greenhouse gas reduction. This is going to be a qualified greenhouse gas reduction plan, which allows the city to do some pretty neat things with CEQA and streamlining projects, hopefully making it easier to get development done within the city, as long as it conforms to the things that the CAP lay out, CAP consistency. And the state targets right now are 40% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions below 1990 levels by 2030, and then a long-term goal of carbon neutrality by 2045. And that idea of carbon neutrality is a big driver for why we're talking about building electrification. So Chico's emissions over time, as population has increased pretty dramatically, especially post-Camp Fire, every sector has decreased emissions. Electricity significantly, 42 and 31% for commercial and residential, being driven by a continually cleaner grid and cleaner electricity being provided by PG&E. Waste emissions have decreased, and even gasoline and diesel. So the amount of amount we're driving around has decreased and the efficiency of our cars have become better. Commercial gas and residential gas has continued to climb, and this is being driven predominantly because gas is always going to have the same emission factor until we start talking about biogas and hydrogen, which is a huge other can of worms and pretty costly, pretty difficult to get. And that's kind of the limitation of natural gas is we really can't do much about it. It's always going to have an emission factor of 0.5 per metric ton CO2 per therm or whatever it is. And we can only get so efficient. So natural gas emissions are, like I said, a growing portion of Chico's overall emission source. The first is transportation fuel. This is throughout California. This is the case. Natural gas comes in second for Chico, with 14% being due to residential gas and 7% due to commercial gas. And then this residential and commercial electricity is continuing to decrease over time. We'll talk a little bit more about that. And then waste staying around 5% or so. So when we're working on the climate action plan, really the two focus areas for us are buildings and transportation. That makes up 81% of emissions in Chico and expected to be 92% just from natural gas and transportation by 2045. And this is, I'll get into the SB 100 stuff in a little bit, but 21% of emissions currently, like I said, is from natural gas. And this is expected to increase over time due to development and growth, but also a relative contribution because we're moving to electric vehicles. We're moving to, and we also have SB 100, which is a huge driving factor of greenhouse gas reductions throughout the state. So SB 100 is a state law requiring all electricity in the state of California to be 50% renewable by 2030 and 100% carbon free by 2045. So essentially what this means is that anything that is electric by 2045 or before will be carbon neutral or have zero emissions. So whether that's a building, a car, your computer, all of it carbon free, where that natural gas emission factor is going to stay relatively constant. So this legislation, SB 100, is really the impetus for this idea of building electrification. It means that anytime we build an electric building, that building is going to be carbon free by 2045 as well. So it's setting us up to reach these long-term goals. So that has driven a lot of jurisdictions. I believe we're at 42 or 45 throughout the state of California to have some sort of all-electric building requirement. And it's being driven mostly by trying to reach these climate goals and mitigate climate change that's going on. So a couple things about a REACH code that we need to kind of know about. It has to be at least as stringent as a statewide code, so we can't go less stringent. It also has to be demonstrably cost effective. We can't make things that don't pencil out. And it has to be approved by the CEC or the California Energy Commission. And it needs to be reapproved anytime there's an energy code update, which in California is every 3 years. We had Title 24 2019 was the latest, and then we'll have a new code in 2022. And then we also have to be really careful not to preempt or exceed any federal efficiency standards. So we can't mandate a piece of equipment has higher efficiency than what is acceptable at the state level, or sorry, the federal level. So most of the REACH codes that we're seeing, new codes for electrification, is all electric new construction. So a phase out of natural gas in new development. Currently, like I said, 42 cities have a requirement, either all electric or some form of that with some exemptions or some infeasibility waivers available. So one of the things I talked about, a requirement for a REACH code, is that it has to be cost effective. And there's kind of three ways that we can talk about or think about cost effectiveness. There's the construction cost. So it's how much does it cost to actually build this building, or another way to think of it is upfront costs. Then there's the utility bill cost, which is how much are the long-term costs? How much does it cost to operate this building over time? What are tenants going to see on their bills? And then we have time-dependent valuation, which is a much more complicated way to look at things, and it takes into account societal costs, infrastructure costs across the system, time of use, and even the cost of carbon, or the societal value of reducing carbon. So we're mostly going to focus on kind of construction costs and utility costs. It's a little easier to think about, and it tells a pretty good story on its own. So this table here shows the modeled costs for building all electric buildings in Chico's climate zone, and what the on-bill savings are. So this is for a code compliant home with the absolute minimum requirements for efficiency. So what we'll see is pretty significant cost savings. So this is construction costs, and parentheses means negative. So single family, anywhere from a $30,000 savings to a $3,000 cost. Multifamily, low rise, $20,000 savings to $4,000 cost, and then pretty substantial savings for other building types. The downside is we do see life cycle on-bill savings that are actually negative. So this is, again, using these like resistance heating elements, still considered to be cost effective over time because the savings on the construction side are better than the on-bill. But that's not really the kind of building we want to build. We don't want to have a resident sitting in these kind of inefficient buildings with high costs. So this next slide, like I talked about, we're not able to use like high efficient heat pumps in these models to demonstrate cost effectiveness because they preempt federal minimums. So this is another scenario where some of the savings from doing that development is put into a bigger photovoltaic system. And what's really cool about this is that average construction costs are still negative. So that's a savings. And on-bill cost savings are positive. So this means that these buildings are less expensive to build and less expensive to live in. So really just winning across the board here. And again, this is specific for Chico's climate zone.
Hey, Ryan.
Yeah.
I did get a question. What does REACH stand for, or how is it defined, from Tom?
What is REACH?
Yeah.
Under REACH code.
Like, what is REACH?
Yeah, so it's a REACH code, so a code that goes beyond the current Title 24 building code requirement, and it's adopted by a city.
Thank you.
So the other thing to consider about this is not just the cost today. So the data I showed you on the last two slides is given our current energy cost conditions with PG&E's rates for electricity and natural gas. One of the big issues that we're seeing is that as natural gas is used less and less, the cost of natural gas is going to increase over time. And part of this is due just to efficiency. So there's less throughput of natural gas through the pipes, but the cost of maintaining those pipes is still the same. And that infrastructure is already in there and it's being paid for by ratepayers. So as we have this reduction in gas utilization, we're expecting to see the cost associated with a therm of gas to increase. And as other cities are electrifying, new construction is all electric, people are replacing gas equipment with electric, which we're hoping will happen, that could exacerbate the cost of natural gas. So what we want to make sure we do is limit the amount of new natural gas infrastructure that's put in order to have long-term savings and keep the rate that we pay for gas at a reasonable level, so we're not left paying substantial amounts. And this is from a report by GridWorks. PG&E, E3, a bunch of the other groups are involved. And there are some pretty substantial increases in the cost of a therm if we don't do something kind of to prepare for this transition. So one of the questions that we get a bunch is why go ahead and do this reach code ahead of the state? Why doesn't the state just do it? The state is currently working on their next code, which will come out in 2022 and be effective January 1st, 2023. Currently, we don't know exactly what the state is thinking. This electrification push has been pretty significant in the last year or so, and the state hasn't provided really any public guidance yet on how they're going to address electrification. I've heard little bits here and there. It's definitely being thought about, but we don't have any clear indication of what the next code is going to require. However, we have public letters from SMUD, PG&E, SCE, and others who are really calling for all electric building requirements because this is really planning for this in the future or planning for this now is going to allow us to get to our electrification goal or our carbon reduction goals. And planning for it now is going to significantly reduce costs, again, by keeping infrastructure out of the ground that we know we're not going to use in the future. And then major studies at this point have really shown that building electrification is the most cost-effective pathway to carbon neutrality for the state by several billions of dollars a year. So I did mention that there are like biofuels out there, hydrogen that could help decrease the emission factor of natural gas. Those are pretty significantly more expensive than the electrification pathway. There's some pretty good reports detailing that from a utility perspective. So in addition, electrification is, in addition to being cost effective, it's also helps to improve public health. There's more and more research showing negative impacts of having natural gas combustion inside the home. And it's also a building safety issue. While we have had fires and things like that associated with electric, there's I think it's like 50-something% of fires in California, building fires, stem from natural gas. Earthquakes, not such a big deal in Chico, but also way faster to get electricity back on than natural gas systems. Going to some of the emissions side, this is something that really surprised me when I started looking into it. In California, power plants emit about 16 tons a day of nitrous oxide or NO2 or NOx, where our buildings emit 92. So a significant portion of NOx emissions are coming from just running our appliances in our buildings. And indoor air quality standards can oftentimes be exceeded when you're running your stove or oven with natural gas. And that's been linked to asthma and all kinds of other issues. So yeah, this is just getting into some of the NOx issues tied to respiratory disease. Asthma can be 50 to 400% higher when you have a natural gas stove over an electric stove. So pretty interesting. Some research out there and more being done, kind of tying these health risks together with emissions from natural gas. So there's a lot of good reasons to think about electrification. On the other side, we've definitely heard concerns around the higher cost potential. Just concerned that technologies aren't there yet. There's low market penetration of heat pump hot water heaters. Issues around contractor training. Are we going to be able to find people to do this work? And are we going to be able to get through Title 24? I think there's still this thought in a lot of people's minds about like the gold medallion homes of the 70s that were all electric and they were super expensive and they used a ton of energy. So I think there's still a little bit there of worry around that, which I'm hoping that we can talk through today and kind of alleviate some of these concerns. So instead of me just talking at you all about all the models and the studies that have been done, I'm really happy to turn it over to Chuck, who's going to talk through his experience working on all electric building in the city of Chico.
Yeah, good evening, commissioners. Excuse my outfit. I was just coaching Little League, so I ran in to talk with y'all. I was one of those reluctant contractors, developers that was kind of afraid of the unknown, I think is what it came down to, and not knowing about all electric. And by happenstance, I did a 104 unit here in California Park. It's called the Skyline Apartments. And I was told that I would have a delay on installing the gas. And so I decided, okay, I'm not going to wait. I'm going to go all electric. Not knowing, kind of jumping in feet first. It was actually quite a surprise on the savings that I had. I also own the apartments, but the savings I had on the actual build, I don't have the graphs. I apologize, as organized as Ryan does, but I'll kind of go over this. The actual savings from my plumber after I told him we didn't have to run the gas to all the units, Ryan has it on the screen, was $85,000 to $100,000 just in material, which is huge. Another big thing, which is from PG&E, I'll just kind of go down this and I'll speak to some other points. But the need to find locations for gas meters, for separation from electric meters, from cable meters, from everything else, you almost have to start deleting windows on buildings. So now that's another bonus that you don't have to find a space on your buildings, nor do you have to look at them. Let's see here. The 6 month is the thing where I decided I was paying a private investor high interest rate, so that's saving obviously on that. And then when I was looking into my cost on my heat pumps, I was, you're told this big scary story about it's going to cost you twice as much, and lo and behold, it was the same cost as a traditional furnace, this heat pump, and many more times efficient than a traditional, I'll call it a furnace. Being an owner, with the addition of the solar and my tenants right now, their average PG&E bill is $30 a month. I give all the benefit of my solar to my tenants, but as an owner builder, I have for the second generation tenants, I have the ability to actually sell the power back to them. So it's another plus as an owner of a project of this size too. I'm sure that the rep from PG&E can talk to us, but the virtual net metering allows you to allocate different amount of solar panels of your array to different apartments. So if a 1 bedroom only needs 3 or 4, you can allocate 6 or 7 to a 3 bedroom unit, correctly, in other words. The hot water heaters that I came across, they were $800 more than a traditional. And that might seem like a lot, but in the scheme of things, if you do the math, it's still you still save more than the break-even point of what I spent on the more expensive hot water heaters. And again, much more efficient. Also, so in town, I've built a lot of single-family homes. I've built, I think it's 129 single-family homes and 267 last count of multifamily. So on my single-family homes, again, you have a benefit of the no time waiting around for gas to be put in the ground. So you can go straight to work. You put the conduit in for electric, pave the road, you're good to go. Let's see. The same thing with the heat pump versus the traditional furnaces. They're the same price. So there is no downside to doing this. I do have some bids that I gave to Ryan. Ryan, maybe if at a later date you want to share, I did send some of that to you. That shows the difference in price. I knew that you were trying to keep it succinct in your slides, but if they request those, you can forward them on to them. Another thing with the electric option, when you use these heat pumps, it gives you such a high credit in your Title 24 that you can reduce it to not having a QII, which is quality inspection for the insulation. You can reduce your R value in your insulation. You no longer have to do both the rafters and the attic space. You can get away from the radiant barrier on the plywood, and I don't know if you're aware of this, but regular plywood's $50 a sheet right now. So, and then you can reduce, which I never thought we'd see again in my lifetime, is that even with these more efficient hot water heaters and heat pumps, you can reduce back down to 2x4 walls, which is a significant savings. And so and this is coming from a guy that doesn't like change, that doesn't like and is scared of the unknown. And we've worked through this, and it's actually something that I could get on board. And I'm sure Brendan could agree with this, that I'm not very good with change. So I never thought I'd be standing on a soapbox like saying that this is a good thing, but it really is. He had the reach points there, and 2 of the 3, I think I just kind of made examples of that. These do meet 2 of his 3 categories that he had. Let's see. One thing that is very important to know, though, is just as we're all these projects start with the architect and your Title 24 people. I had a long conversation with an architect, and a company named MicroPass, up until 8 years ago, used to be the state's guru for like Title 24. And when there was a code change, they used to send out to Title 24 people, architects, you know, hey, this is where you can get your new credits. This is the path we're heading down. That doesn't happen anymore. So the big disconnect is in the information to the people creating these Title 24. So that's very important. So these heat pumps, a lot of people don't understand. It's a huge credit to your Title 24 to allow a reduction back down to a 2x4 wall and a lower R value because it's not efficient is amazing. And that's what needs to be made known and widespread throughout everybody who's doing these plans. And I think that about covers it for me.
Awesome. Thanks a ton, Chuck. That was great. Yeah, so I think to kind of complete this picture, I'm going to pass it over to Hannah to talk a little bit about PG&E's stance on this, thoughts on this, and any other information you want to share.
But before
Sure.
we go, Hannah, just really quickly, I want to remind everyone, if you have a question, please type it in the chat box or raise your hand. If you have the Q&A function, please don't use that. Just use the chat, and I'll make sure that the host or presenter sees it. Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks so much for having me. Apologies for going on and off video there between some cranky internet and I'm fostering some rescue puppies at the moment, and they had a little mini need that you didn't need to see. But I'm here and listening, and frankly listening as Ryan and others have covered just about everything I can or want to say. Thank you for stealing my thunder and allowing me to be even more brief, because really, who wants to hear from me for too long? But I did want to express, that PG&E supports all electric new construction. Some people are surprised to hear that, especially given the G in PG&E. But PG&E really does believe that all electric new construction, when it's cost effective and feasible, is good for customers. It's good for the climate. It's good for California's future. It's where we're heading, and it's a good direction to be headed in. As Ryan said, all electric new buildings we found are generally less costly to construct, less costly to occupy. You've heard all of that. But one of the reasons as well that PG&E has been very public about supporting all electric new construction, which we've done with individual cities, and also sent a letter to the California Energy Commission expressing support for statewide all electric new construction, is because, in addition to being good for customers, it's good for affordability. And as Ryan mentioned, believe it or not, PG&E actually does welcome the opportunity to not install new gas infrastructure. Expanding the existing system incurs costs, some of which have to be recovered from customers over decades. And gas assets installed today may not really be a part of our deeply decarbonized future. And that's an affordability challenge waiting to happen. So I know a question that comes up a lot is sort of, can the grid handle it? You know, will this crash the grid, to put it very bluntly and non-scientifically? And the thing is that especially with new construction, you know, PG&E is always forecasting potential new load, paying attention to not only sort of trends being seen, but paying attention to state policy, to state building code. You know, we see that that's the direction code is headed toward. And so we're, you know, with any new project especially, you know, we're working with the customer or developer early on in their build to figure out what they're going to need. And we can handle that. And so really, PG&E is prepared to meet the electric load demands that all electric new buildings will require. We are eager to make it go even more smoothly by working with the city and working with customers and developers, you know, early on, so that we can plan and be more effective and efficient. But really, the impacts to our infrastructure, we're not really concerned about meeting the need of new all-electric buildings. And I hope that allays some concerns. I want to quickly check the comment section to see if there are any questions. Doesn't look like any questions so far.
It looks like we got something from,
Oh, Richie can finish.
okay.
Oh, sorry.
Am I missing a hand?
Continue, you're good.
Okay. So all in all, I've covered pretty much what I wanted to come here to say. PG&E supports our cities and communities. We see Chico potentially headed in this direction, and PG&E will be here to make sure that electric grid issues are not something that will hold you back from going where you want to go. Are there questions or comments? I wanted to just sort of make this conversational and be here to talk about this stuff rather than kind of preach at you. So please let me know if you have questions, concerns, reactions. Yes, Kirk.
Is PG&E lobbying like lots of gas companies across the country to forbid cities and localities from forbidding the installation of gas in new construction?
PG&E was the first, and as far as I know, only gas company to come out in support of all electric new construction policies. We were at the Berkeley City Council meeting to speak in support of their gas ban when they became the first city to have such a prohibition. You know, PG&E is in a unique position, being both a gas and electric utility, although I should point out that we have had a consistent position in all cities, whether we serve gas, electric, or both. And did send that letter to the California Energy Commission encouraging all electric new construction statewide. So it has less to do with what fuel we're providing, but we really do see expanding the gas system as having some potential affordability challenges for customers down the line, potentially for more vulnerable customers who are continuing to use gas, even as Ryan mentioned, you know, the costs of keeping the system safe are high, but use is low. So I hope that a very long-winded answer to your question. No, we are not opposing, and in fact, we are supporting cities in their quest to pursue all electric new construction.
Is that true of Cal Edison too, and the other major supplier in the state?
So SCE is very supportive of electrification. PG&E is the only dual fuel utility in California. In the Southern California area, SoCal Edison is just electric. So you probably aren't surprised that they're pro-electrification. SoCal Gas, I believe, has a somewhat different view on some of these issues.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
We have a question. Does PG&E offer advice to homeowners of older homes on switching to all electric appliances?
So that's heading into the retrofit space, it sounds like. And my understanding is that what we're talking about for the policy here just has to do with new construction. Am I right?
Correct.
Okay. I just want to clarify that because I know sometimes there can be concerns that all electric new construction means everybody has to go all electric all at once in all buildings. As far as retrofits go, PG&E is, we're figuring out what to offer customers. There's there are some programs through energy efficiency that are being looked at, and I'm not sure that I can name a single program that has to do with all electric residential retrofits right now, but I could certainly ask around. That's not because something doesn't exist necessarily, it's because I'm not familiar with it.
Then we have another one. This might be more towards Ryan, but maybe not. In the 42 cities that have moved forward with electrification, what have the responses, concerns been from consumers? Do they miss their gas fireplaces, for example?
Yeah, I'm working in a few of those cities right now and haven't heard that many issues. I think this is all pretty new, honestly. So I don't know that there's been a ton of required buildings that have been built and people are living in them. But that being said, I'm working in Sacramento a lot, and they've got hundreds or maybe even thousands at this point of units that are all electric, and those were all being built, before any requirement. And I think people are getting used to it. Fireplaces is a tough one, I think, but in a lot of places in California, we can't have those already anyway.
Then we have another, Joshua has a number of questions. So Joshua, I'm going to unmute you so you can ask them directly. You are unmuted.
Molly, thank you. I actually have just a couple of comments. So I don't have a lot of questions because I work in this space on a daily basis. So it's relatively familiar territory for me. But so I'll just defer until folks have had an opportunity to get their questions asked, and you guys have had an opportunity to respond. And I'd like to just offer a couple of observations.
At this time, we do.
That was a quick question.
Oh, okay. Kirk, have a question?
Yeah, Kirk, I think you had a question asking about the vendor.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, that was to the contractor. I wanted to know who his local subs were that supplied the HVAC systems, and who did the electric water heater.
So I use Allcom Plumbing out of Yuba City, as my plumber. And you cannot use him because I'm going to keep him busy for the next 4 years.
Okay.
And then Jesse Heating and Air does my multifamily, and then Ashcraft Heating and Air does all my single family housing.
Do you know who the manufacturer was on those HVAC systems?
You know what I could do? I could get them to Ryan. I could get everything.
I have those quotes from you already, Chuck, so I can pass those along to Molly and Brendan. They can send them out.
I think the heat pumps, though, I think it's important that they see those too, and the pricing of those individually. So if I get those to you tomorrow, Ryan, actually it won't be tomorrow. I'll be at the Giants game, but on Monday I'll get them to you. If you can forward them on, I think it's really important to show the efficiency and the price is the same. I mean, because I was that guy that I don't like something new, and it was actually pretty simple.
Cool, yeah,
Okay.
that'd be great.
Joshua.
Am I unmuted?
We can hear you.
Okay, great. My mute button disappeared. I just wanted to say to Ryan that I know that in Sacramento County SMUD, the utility there has been, I mean, they've been paying for free electrification bundles for businesses and also for affordable housing groups. So the utility is pretty, they show their motivation by spending their revenue on fuel switching for, you know, certain sections or certain segments of the business community. Yeah, and affordable housing through their low income set aside program. So
Yeah, I think that there's a much bigger nut to crack when it comes to existing buildings and how we're going to incentivize that, finance that. There are a few cities right now really working on how that's going to look and how we're going to address the equity issues around that, because it does require work and resources, money upfront to do that. So I think there are some really exciting avenues for that, like tariff on-bill financing, which is a way to finance those upgrades that's tied to the building and through rates instead of to an individual. So it's accessible to folks even with like really no ability to take on debt or low credit scores. So I think there's some exciting things, but I think the existing building thing is just a much more difficult avenue because it does cost more.
right. And just as an advocate for environmental justice communities, I think it's important to think about those equity issues when we press forward on electrification ordinances. That, you know, if we're not thinking about that at the same time, then the equity issue is going to be like unavoidable. So stranding the natural gas system on folks that can't afford to do the upgrades, it's like a, you know, it's a real issue that they can quantify, you know, with financial impacts over the next 10 years. So where, you know, working for grid, we've, you know, supported electrification ordinances, but not without the caveat that if you don't think about the equity impact, it'll arrive despite the lack of planning. So.
I have a question for Hannah at PG&E, and you may not be able to answer this question, but one of the things in listening to Chuck Tetro talk about his project, and glad that it worked out well for him. But part of what drove him down this pathway was the issue of it was going to take a whole lot longer to get gas than it was to get electric, and that's what started down that pathway. Is that something that other projects and other developers would also likely see? Like, is it going to take longer to get gas and potentially cost more for new development or new subdivisions or other things that may then drive more of that demand towards all electric, because there are cost and time implications to pushing the gas infrastructure?
So first of all, you know, if you're going to put in gas infrastructure, there is cost associated with that that you avoid by not having it. I mean, I know I'm just repeating the obvious, but it's true. And although there is a system of line extension allowances via the CPUC that are statewide, there can still be cost. And there's cost to the developer, and there's also some of those costs that get passed along to all gas customers and have to be paid back over years. So what's, you know, sort of worrisome is if a developer decides to put in gas and then some of the cost sort of remains for those customers, you know, down the line as gas gets less affordable. So yes, you can avoid the cost of installing new gas. The gas costs are going to be larger kind of the farther out you get. If you're needing to, you know, extend pipeline, digging trenches is costly. And so avoiding that work can save time and can save cost. I don't want to speak to statistics that I don't have about, you know, exact numbers, but it's, you know, it's taking a whole system out of the equation. So that can be good for time and money.
Thank you.
You're good to go, Kirk.
Yeah, I wanted to know, the contractor, why is it that you were able to go from 2x6s to 2x4 studs and lower the R value of your insulation? Is that just because electricity will be so much cheaper than gas?
If you're talking, you're muted. Holly.
All right.
Thanks.
I was talking with my hands, sorry. So the short answer is that the credit you get for this heat pump gives you so many points that you are able to lessen in other areas. So you could go back down to 2x4 studs, lessen your R value. And a heat pump, it doesn't have a spike like natural gas does, where it's an instantaneous. A heat pump is more, and it keeps a consistent heat throughout the day. And so therefore it's much more efficient. When you come home and somebody hits the heater, or the kid leaves their window open, that furnace kicks on, it's a spike in your gas right there. So this more consistent and controlled temperature setting allows you get more points on your Title 24. Therefore, you don't have to beef up everything else. And so that I hope I answered your question.
I think you're muted, Kirk.
Sure.
Oh,
There you go.
Good.
You're good.
so if you use 2x6s and kept the insulation the same, the long-term cost savings on utility bills would be much less, right? So the price of owning these homes, the operating costs would go down. Is that true?
Come on.
I mean, you opted for the upfront cost of building the house. But if you wanted to save the owner or the renter of the apartment on the utility bills, you would have kept the walls the same thickness and the insulation the same. Is that true?
Well, so it gives you the ability to do 2x4s. I still do all my exterior walls 2x6, but
Okay.
I could have chose to do 2x4.
Yeah.
I did do the more efficient home. We kind of pride ourselves on our houses. It gave me the option to do it, but we still use 2x6. It was a cost that I incurred of about $1,500 per home, but we chose to do that as a company to keep it more efficient.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
Gas was so cheap in Oklahoma, where I grew up as a kid, that they put no insulation, they used 2x4 things, and you just assumed that you'd run your gas heater all the time.
Maybe some newspapers in the wall.
Later.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We just had someone say something to you. It's Tom, you have to run the heat pump all the time. Heat isn't as instantly available as it is with gas. The reason for the T24 modifications is part of the T24 gang. You can have the offsets for energy efficiency equipment.
Yeah.
That's it.
That is true.
Thank you, Tom. We don't have any further questions at this time. If anyone does, you want to put them in the chat box. And if not, we can open it up to Josh to make his comments.
Can you ask if they have any more questions of me?
Yeah, does anyone have any more questions for Chuck specifically? Because he does have somewhere to be. His kid is killing it in baseball.
My kid hit 2 home runs while we've been sitting here, guys.
I didn't hear where your project was.
Let's see, I built, I built 32 units on West Sacramento. I built 26 units off of Oakdale.
Your apartment project is on.
What's that?
Your apartment project's on Bruce.
Oh yeah, I built 44 on Joshua Tree, 44 on East Avenue, 104 on Skyline, on Bruce and Cal Park there.
That's the all electric project.
That's all electric. And then we're doing a 98 we just started over right below, do they know the local area? Just going up 32, just below Tom Fogarty's project.
And will that new one be all electric?
That one, I'm not the owner. I've sold it to a affordable project, affordable developer, but I am the contractor. It didn't have solar on the plans because it was an older bit, but I talked to them into putting solar on it.
Thank you.
Can I slip on?
I just wanted to say thanks, Chuck. You great explanations on a lot of the technical issues about the building and the efficiencies. So that really helped me understand it. And,
Well, it doesn't get more layman than I am, so I appreciate your sentiment.
Thank you, Chuck.
You guys, thank you for listening.
Thank you, Chuck. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Have fun tomorrow.
Thanks.
Might be good luck for you to stay here, though, for your son's sake.
I told him the home runs wouldn't have been hit if he would have been there.
That's right.
So yeah, do we want to invite Joshua to share his thoughts?
You're unmuted.
Thank you very much. And I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to thank Chuck, but I really appreciated having a local builder's perspective on a positive and successful approach. And let me just caveat the few statements that I'll make here that I both work in the electrification space and am a proponent of decarbonizing our building stock through a variety of mechanisms. So I'm coming to this, with how do we make this happen in the Chico community in a constructive and positive way. I'm not coming in as a contrarian in any way. Also, I guess I should say, because I work in the space, I'm not representing anybody but myself in my comments. So I work in a number of electrification projects. Granted, most of them are not new construction. They are retrofit projects, which is significantly, as Ryan rightly stated, significantly more challenging with lots and lots of different elements associated with retrofitting buildings. I also work in REACH codes across California, so I have a little bit of experience with REACH codes as well. So the comments I'm offering are simply to help us as a community identify how can we best implement, if we're going to implement a REACH code here in advance of Title 24, how do we best do that, and what are some of the timing implications? So enough with the sort of preamble. One of the elements that I've noticed in REACH codes and researching REACH codes is, the vast majority of them, if you look at the REACH code map, are in either the San Francisco, Los Angeles, or San Diego areas. So they are sort of in and surrounding primarily large metropolitan areas and sort of the higher cost of living, higher cost of construction, higher home price areas in California. So while Ryan's comments are absolutely true that there are more and more REACH codes being adopted every day, if you look at the map, 95% plus of them are either in those three metropolitan areas or are in areas like Sonoma County and Marin County, where the sort of per capita GDP is significantly higher. And so that's just one sort of basic observation, not drawing any value from it, just an observation. As it relates to many of the REACH codes I have seen, some of the beneficial options around REACH codes have been, does the municipality have a community choice aggregator, a CCA, which is an alternative to purchasing power and for the community, purchasing local power for the community? Does the community have community solar options? Chuck's project is a fantastic example. He also has lots of roof space and no shade. Not all buildings, new construction buildings, are in that situation. So community solar, where solar is not an option, which is as significant as Ryan's graphs and data showed, having solar on your home or having access to purchasing community solar, which is locally purchased solar from a larger farm, has a big impact on the actual cost of operating an all-electric building. And related to this, but not specifically, and then I'll stop on reach codes, are what is the state of load shifting and other demand response programs? I know this would be getting into sort of the technical details, but the long and short of it is there are, and PG&E is working hard on this, there are programs that are beginning to emerge. Some of them have been around for a long time that allow these smart appliances, these smart heat pump appliances to do things in an intelligent way, which shifts their load to the point where they're using the cheapest, cleanest power during the middle of the day when the sun is shining its brightest. So all of these factors factor into the viability of reach codes and how they're designed. The last thing I'll just mention about reach codes is I would encourage us as a community and the city and the folks looking to adopt this code to look at the various reach codes. And as Ryan mentioned, not all of them, in fact, a relatively small percentage of them are prescriptively all electric. That is to say, there are accommodations for either when going all electric is not feasible, or consumer preference or market forces like cost or availability of new technologies like heat pump water heaters. I think Chuck was really, it was great comment to show how heat pump space heating and cooling has been around forever. We just never ran those condensers the other direction. So that's a really great success. And I would just encourage the folks working on this to adopt, if they're going to adopt a reach code, to adopt one that is appropriate to our local market conditions. And I know I've taken a lot of time, so I won't speak to the Title 24 things because as Ryan rightly noted, they are still in development. And while there's some indications of the directions that's going to go, I won't bother you with conjecture, but thank you for the opportunity to provide any comments.
Thank you, Josh.
Thank you, Josh and Joshua. This is Brendan, and I also just want to highlight that the workshop today is more about sharing information about building electrification. It's not dictating a specific direction. The notion and highlighting the fact that a reach code is required is just information at this point.
No, absolutely.
And I just want to say hi, Josh.
Not sure who that was, but hi. Oh, hey, Mark.
Well, we do not have any other questions.
And so that just, I just want to highlight one more thing, that's because a lot of interesting, important people are on this workshop today virtually. So I want to highlight that the workshop ultimately is being recorded and it will be available on the city's website under the Climate Action Commission meeting date. These are recorded and posted up there. So by all means, feel free to share the information and forward it to people. And if there's certain portions of the presentation that you thought were relevant and important, we'd love to get that information out to folks. Kurt?
Yeah, I thought the last guy's comments, I guess his name was Joshua, about his comment about adopting your reach code to be compatible with local market conditions. I mean, that's why I asked the earlier contractor about his suppliers and the manufacturers. And I noticed that for his heat pump water heaters, he had to go to Yuba City. I mean, I think we're really limited here by the technology of our suppliers and what they're willing to, and the people they've got available to install this stuff.
I will say, Kurt, I think he was using just his standard supplier who happens to be from Yuba City rather than having to go there to get someone. So just a caveat, I think there is some work that we need to do around education and getting people prepped for this. So I wouldn't want to like pass something tomorrow, but it's not that hard. Like people are getting it figured out. You don't need a ton of specialized knowledge to make them work. I think you do just need to know what the requirements are and what the technologies are.
Okay, I hope so.
I just want to jump in. I respectfully disagree, Kurt. I think that the market is going to be able to handle this. They've been getting market signals for quite a few years. There's been legislation. There's recent market development funds been released in this area. So this isn't, I recognize it's new to you. It's not new to them. And I think this is a clear direction the state has been going. Just if nothing else, by all of the stuff that we've seen that they produced around the issue. So.
We have another comment from Tom to Kirk. We're not limited. The technology is present and has been present all over. There are a lot of manufacturers and suppliers. So kind of just echoing what Mark just said.
Also have somebody that wants to share a comment as well.
Okay, I will unmute you.
This is Scott Wolf.
Scott, you are unmuted.
Yeah, hi everybody. Thanks for the presentation this evening. So I just wanted to say, yeah, just in November, I had Royal Heating and Air put in a heat pump. They replaced our package unit, which was a gas furnace and with an all-electric unit, and it was super easy to do. They did have to run one extra electric line over to it, but it was easy, and it was very affordable to do that relative to the other options we had. And actually, I don't think it was any more expensive than just replacing the straight up unit, and they themselves absorbed the cost of just running the extra electric line over there. So so we went that way. Before long, we're going to be replacing with a heat pump water heater, our gas water heater as well in our own house. And I already have a contractor to do that as well. So I don't see any lack of people who are able to do this in our market.
Thank you. Are there any other comments?
I mentioned that if anybody is a contractor on this call and is interested in getting training on the installation and technologies of heat pump water heaters or heat pump space and cooling, PG&E does host contractor trainings around this. They're relatively high level, but they are experts who are experts in installing these technologies, both in new and existing homes. And you can go to PG&E's education website and look for those. I don't work for PG&E. I just happen to have taken some of their trainings.
Thank you for the endorsement. But it is true. There are a lot of free classes, and we are looking at electrification and getting ready for that. So thank you.
All right. I just had two really quick things. One, I wanted to, Josh, thank you for joining us tonight, and I hope you may fill one of our seats on our commission here soon. And I apologize, but I have to go. I have a public hearing item that I just got noticed that's up at the city of Fort Bragg, and I have to go jump into that meeting and present an agenda item. So sorry to leave early for this study session. It's been very informative, and thank you all for coming and getting great public participation.
Thanks, Mike.
All right, thank you.
Any other comments or questions for anybody? Any other chats or hands or commissioners' comments?
Not seeing any.
Just gonna virtual space. I'm gonna give it an awkward virtual moment to wait. We're all used to these, so I'll try to fill it with something entertaining. We're not. Okay, hearing no other comments, seeing no other hands, I'm not seeing any other mutes from commissioners. We will thank Ryan. Chuck, please pass on some additional thanks to him if and when you see him, Molly and Brendan. And Hannah and Alyssa, thank you both for being here this evening. for this informative session about electrification. As Brendan mentioned, it is recorded, and so we do hope to share this with the larger community. For those folks who weren't able to be with us this evening, that's the wonderful thing about the virtual space, is that things are recorded and we can much more easily share them. So thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Hannah. Thank you, Alyssa. And with that, I think we'll move on to the next agenda item.
If I could just, I also want to thank Brian on the way out. So thanks. And I really appreciated the air quality information. I think that's really helpful in the discussion. So thank you.
Cool. Okay, great. Well, moving on, our next agenda item is business from the floor and public comment. I think we've taken some of that already, but if there's anything else that the public would like to comment on, now is your chance. We'll go ahead and do the same thing, chat, raise your hand, we can unmute you if anybody has comments. More awkward virtual silence. Okay, not Kirk. Kirk, would you like to wait for reports and communications?
I wanted to talk to Mr. Wolf. I think he talked about doing a retrofit.
Item, Kirk.
Oh, okay.
I apologize.
Okay, we'll find out how to connect you with Mr. Wolf. Okay, Kirk?
Okay.
Okay. Okay, moving on. Item number 5, reports and communications. Molly, looks like you've been abandoned, but do we have any reports or communications?
I don't have any cool kids doing sports, so I'm here manning the station. No, not really. It's still we're accepting applications for the CAC until the 12th. We have received some more. I think I saw on the agenda that they are expecting to get hopefully make a decision on the new commissioners by the end of next month. So again, for those of you who terms are up, I would appreciate it, or we would all appreciate it if you could continue to serve. If you cannot, please let me know as soon as possible so I can scramble to make sure everyone shows up on our meeting so we have a quorum. And I do really appreciate you guys being here and staying engaged, even though your term is technically over. I know a lot of you have reapplied, but I know some of you haven't, so we really do appreciate it. And that's all I have on my end.
Could we just get a quick confirmation, Kirk and Rebecca, are you willing to stay on another month until official appointments can be made?
I am.
Thanks, Rebecca. Thank you, Kirk.
But I also filed my application way back last fall, and I wonder if it's still around.
It is there. You're still in the mix.
Okay.
They extended this application for 3 boards and commissions. Ours was one of them. So you're still in the running, and you should be emailed instructions on when it's going to go to council and how they're going to choose the new commissioners. So that'll be coming from the clerk's office.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other commissioners have any reports or communications? Okay, well, with that, we will go ahead and adjourn at 7:14 in the p.m. For the 5 attendees, thank you all for being here. Again, this was recorded, so we will make sure to share this for people who weren't able to be here for the electrification conversation. Thank you all for your time, and I will see you virtually in another month. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.